Journey of Roman Soldiers in the War with Germania. Chapter 1. The Call to Arms. In the year 9 CE, the Roman Empire was at the height of its power, but its expansionist ambitions were about to face a formidable test. Far beyond the boundaries of the empire, across the Rhine River, lay the wild and untamed land of Germania, a land inhabited by fiercely independent tribes who had long resisted Roman influence. Germania stood as the last major frontier that Rome sought to bring under its control. For Roman soldiers, the journey into Germania was both an opportunity for glory and a perilous mission that would test their courage, loyalty, and endurance. Among the soldiers was a young legionary named Gaius, who had enlisted in the Roman legions at the age of 18, eager to serve the empire. He had heard tales of the glories of conquest in Gaul, of Caesar's triumphs, and the honor that came with the eagle standard of Rome. Yet, he was about to embark on a journey unlike any he had known, into a land where the Roman legions would face an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. General Publius Quinctilius Varus, one of Rome's most respected commanders, was entrusted with the mission to solidify Roman control over Germania. With him, he led 3 legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, numbering more than 20,000 soldiers, along with auxiliary troops. The mission seemed straightforward: march deep into Germania, quell any resistance, and establish Roman dominance in the region. Little did they know that this would be their final campaign in the land beyond the Rhine, and the journey would lead them into a trap set by an unexpected adversary. Chapter 2. Crossing the Rhine. The journey began with the crossing of the Rhine River, a boundary that had long separated the Roman world from the barbarian territories. The river had once seemed a natural barrier between the civilized world of Rome and the wild frontier of Germania. However, the Romans had long held the ambition to extend their reach beyond the Rhine and into the heart of Germania. For Gaius and his comrades, crossing the Rhine was a moment of excitement and trepidation. The soldiers, trained for warfare on open fields and well-versed in the discipline of Roman formations, knew that they were marching into an unknown land. The dense forests, swampy terrain, and wild climate of Germania were foreign to them, and they had little idea of what awaited them beyond the river. As the Roman army advanced deeper into Germania, the soldiers faced the challenges of unfamiliar terrain. The forests of Germania were thick, and the roads were poorly maintained, forcing the legions to march in disarray at times. The soldiers carried heavy armor and equipment, and the conditions were harsh, with rainstorms and the constant threat of ambush. Gaius, though a seasoned soldier, began to feel the weight of the journey. He had been trained to fight in the open fields, but the deep forests and hidden paths of Germania were far more challenging than anything he had experienced in Gaul. Chapter 3. Tensions and Betrayal. As the legions marched deeper into Germania, tensions began to rise. Though the Roman soldiers had fought alongside their allies in Gaul, the Germanic tribes were a different breed of warriors. Fierce, proud, and unyielding, the Germanic tribes were known for their guerrilla tactics, and they used their knowledge of the land to stay hidden from the Romans. The legions were constantly on edge, uncertain of when and where the next attack would come from. The soldiers were further unsettled by the presence of Arminius, a former Roman soldier who had been raised in Rome as a hostage. Arminius had once been a trusted ally of the Roman military, even serving as an officer in the Roman army. However, Arminius had turned against Rome, driven by a desire to protect his people and preserve the independence of the Germanic tribes. Having earned the trust of General Varus, he had positioned himself as a guide, helping the Romans navigate the unfamiliar terrain. But Arminius had a hidden agenda. His loyalty to Rome had long since faded, and he had secretly united the Germanic tribes to prepare for the moment when they would strike. Using his intimate knowledge of Roman tactics, he led Varus and his legions into the heart of the Teutoburg forest, where he had planned an ambush that would change the fate of the Roman army. Chapter 4. The Trap at Teutoburg Forest. The Romans, confident in their strength and discipline, marched forward unaware that they were walking into a trap. The dense forest of Teutoburg was silent, with the sound of marching feet muffled by the thick underbrush. The soldiers carried their heavy gear, and the march was exhausting. Gaius and his comrades were tired, but there was a sense of excitement, The prospect of bringing Roman order to the wild lands of Germania seemed within reach. But as they entered the heart of the forest, all that would change. Without warning, the Germanic tribes, under Arminius's command, attacked. They struck swiftly and without mercy, using guerrilla tactics to harry the Romans from all directions. The Roman soldiers were caught completely off guard, unable to form their usual battle lines in the thick woods. The Germanic warriors, familiar with the terrain, moved swiftly and silently, attacking the Romans from the shadows and vanishing into the forest. The battle was chaos. Roman soldiers were slaughtered in droves as they tried desperately to regroup and defend themselves. Gaius, who had always believed in the might of Rome, felt the ground shake beneath him as the battle raged around him. The Roman legions, so accustomed to the disciplined order of the battlefield, were powerless in the dense forest. The Germanic warriors overwhelmed them, and the fight turned into a massacre. For 3 days, the Romans fought desperately to survive, but the outcome was inevitable. General Varus, realizing the magnitude of his failure, took his own life rather than face the disgrace of defeat. The 3 legions were utterly destroyed, and the Roman soldiers who had survived the battle were either killed or taken as prisoners. Chapter 5: The Aftermath. In the wake of the catastrophic defeat, Gaius, along with a few other survivors, found himself among the scattered remnants of the Roman army. The once proud legions had been broken, their standards lost, and their pride shattered. The journey that had begun with the promise of Roman conquest and glory had ended in utter failure. For the Germanic tribes, the victory at Teutoburg Forest was a symbol of their strength and unity. Arminius, who had orchestrated the ambush, became a hero among his people. The tribes that had once been fragmented now felt a renewed sense of pride, and for a time, they believed that the Roman Empire could be resisted. For the Romans, the defeat was a devastating blow to their imperial ambitions. Emperor Augustus, who had been confident that Germania would eventually fall under Roman control, was deeply shaken. The loss of 3 legions, a significant portion of Rome's military strength, was felt throughout the empire. For the first time, the might of Rome had been humbled. Chapter 5: The Aftermath. In the wake of the catastrophic defeat, Gaius, along with a few other survivors, found himself among the scattered remnants of the Roman army. The once proud legions had been broken, their standards lost, and their pride shattered. The journey that had begun with the promise of Roman conquest and glory had ended in utter failure. For the Germanic tribes, the victory at Teutoburg Forest was a symbol of their strength and unity. Arminius, who had orchestrated the ambush, became a hero among his people. The tribes that had once been fragmented now felt a renewed sense of pride, and for a time, they believed that the Roman Empire could be resisted. For the Romans, the defeat was a devastating blow to their imperial ambitions. Emperor Augustus, who had been confident that Germania would eventually fall under Roman control, was deeply shaken. The loss of 3 legions, a significant portion of Rome's military strength, was felt throughout the empire. For the first time, the might of Rome had been humbled. Chapter 6: The Long Road Home. In the aftermath of the battle, the survivors of the Roman legions began their long march back to the Roman Empire. Gaius, though a survivor, could not shake the feeling of defeat. The once unified Roman army had been torn apart, and the soldiers who had survived were left to grapple with the shame of their loss. They were far from home, in a foreign land where their lives had been upended in the blink of an eye. As Gaius made his way back to Roman territory, he was struck by the brutal reality of war. The journey through Germania, which had once seemed like a road to glory, had instead been a harrowing experience. The Roman soldiers had fought valiantly, but in the end, they had been outmatched by an enemy that was as fierce as it was elusive. Gaius knew that the Roman Empire would not give up on its ambitions to control Germania, but he also understood that the road ahead would be long and uncertain. The defeat at Teutoburg Forest had shown the Romans that they were not invincible, and the journey to conquer Germania would never be the same again. The war with Germania was far from over, but for Gaius and his fellow soldiers, the memory of Teutoburg Forest would forever remain a testament to the cost of ambition and the price of resistance.